I'm going home, oh yes. I'm going home, oh yes. I'm going home, Lord, Lord. I'm going home. I'm going home, Lord, Lord. I'm going home. My baby's good.
In the 1840s, home for these men and women was Lexington, Kentucky, far away from the African homeland of their ancestors, who were captured, stripped of their freedom, and sent across an ocean to a life of slavery. This is the story of one such slave who fled bondage from Ashland, the estate of Senator Henry Clay in Lexington, Kentucky. Escaping the clutches of slavery was a terrifying and grueling ordeal. Every step tracked by slave catchers who were employed to pursue and return escaped slaves to their enslavers. This is also the story of the brave men and women in small towns that dotted the map between slavery and Canada, who risked imprisonment and fines to make the trek possible. Unfortunately, as with most slaves of the period, we don't even know his name. But we do know one place he stayed along the Underground Railroad on his way home. Not to Africa, but to a life of freedom in Canada.
I'm going home.
Fleeing slavery wasn't simply about having the freedom to make choices. It was about escaping brutality and violence and the dehumanization of being bought and sold, making family separation a constant threat.
Enslavers regarded them as if they were livestock, animals, to be trained up and used and disposed of. And violence is one way, whether it's physical violence, emotional violence, all sorts of other types of manipulation to try and force this relationship.
They also lived, the females, women and girls, under the constant threat of sexual exploitation. That never went away. They could be sexually exploited at any time by any number of people. They lived under constant threat of separation from family members.
We know about the vicious beatings, we know about the sexual assaults, but I do think the more insidious ways of dehumanizing the enslaved are the things that are sometimes embedded. Thomas Jefferson wrote that the reason that Africans look the way they do, and he describes the darkening of the skin and the prognathsis, meaning that the jaw juts out and the flat, broad noses, I mean, essentially a face like mine, that we look this way because African women chose to mate with orangutans rather than African men. And yet he's writing this knowing the kind of racial fiction that was.
In the 1740s, slavery existed in every North American colony. But by 1804, after the 13 colonies had become states and 4 more were added, 9 of them in the North had abolished the institution. The South, however, relied heavily on slavery as a labor force that could produce large cash crops like cotton, tobacco, and rice. In addition, slavery was deeply embedded in the social structure of the South.
The South becomes a slave society. The North originally is a society with slaves. And so it eventually kind of dies out, largely because it's not necessarily the most economically viable labor system.
The entire U.S. economic system was completely dependent upon the plantation system of the Deep South. Northern financiers, merchants, bankers, et cetera, factory owners were dependent on the cotton plantations.
We are really talking about a system that is globally profitable. Cotton, rice, sugar, tobacco, these were crops raised in plantations to be sold in the world market. Southern-grown, slave-grown cotton was fueling industrial revolution in Britain. The textile industries in Manchester and Lancaster. their main supply was slave-grown cotton from the South. And this cotton was the largest item of export from the United States, and its value exceeded all other items of export until the Civil War. So we are seeing a very profitable system that was fueling not only Southern economic growth, but also national economic growth. You had cotton textile mills in New England, northern agricultural and manufacturing concerns that supplied the South. So the traditional view that somehow the South and North clashed over differing economic systems is simply incorrect. It was a very complementary relationship. It fueled shipping, insurance, industry, including Wall Street.
Slavery was big business. At the height of the slave trade in the 1840s and 1850s, middlemen, so brokers and so slavers, could expect to get incredible sums when it comes to profit on the open market. So we have to understand that, crass as it is to think in these really stark financial terms, enslavers, even small-scale ones, saw enslaved people as financial products, akin to parents who buy their children a car when they graduate high school or help them with a down payment on a house. Again, it's deeply dehumanizing and crass to think of it in these terms, but that's really how stark it is.
Sold to the gentleman in the black hat.
There's hundreds of middlemen. Whether you are the steamboat owner who's pulling a cargo of hemp and enslaved people down the river, you're a blacksmith who makes shackles, you're someone with a basement who can use it as a temporary holding pen for enslaved coffles waiting to either walk down through Tennessee into Alabama country or make their way to the river and go all the way to New Orleans. An innkeeper here in Lexington who makes plenty of money every time that there's a court date or a market date housing slave traders. There's all kinds of money to be made on slavery, even indirectly. And so I think it's important to recognize that it's not just enslavers who own land and are farming hemp or tobacco or corn. It's all these other auxiliary industries that are making money hand over fist on slavery.
It was an institution for which they were willing to fight, and would in the Civil War.